Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Welcome back to the Stop Overthinking podcast. I have a guest with us today, and we are going to be talking all about hormones. Tasha is here with us. She's an integrative clinical nutritionist, a certified personal trainer, Pilates instructor, founder of Happy Hormone Health. Tasha was living with 6 autoimmune diseases, and for years she struggled with symptoms that controlled her life and found that there was little to no support from her doctors. So by addressing the root cause of her symptom disruption, her life transformed. Since then, she has coached more than 2,000 women in reclaiming their energy, living symptom-free, and transforming their health through hormone balance nutrition. Welcome, Tasha.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to just share about this really important topic for women. Oh my goodness.
We were just saying offline that hormones are a topic that are getting more attention, and certainly depending on your age, but I think it's a topic that can be revisited over and over again. There's so much noise out there. So even if you think you have heard things about hormones, hang in there. You're a woman. You are going to be dealing with this like your entire life. And so I think there's always pieces that you can do. So Tasha, I know that most of my guests on the podcast get into their work because of a personal journey. And what can you share with the listeners today about why you are so passionate about hormone health?
Absolutely. Oh man. So I always like to just preface that I was that kid that was obsessed with health and nutrition from the time that I could get my little patties on my mom's fitness workout videos when I was 9. I did my first workout program when I was 9, and then I found my first teen Vogue and low carb diet shortly after, and I was hooked. And I kind of always wanted to figure out what that secret was. What is that secret that's going to, that they kept hiding from us that was going to give women their best health, their best, physique and confidence and all of that. And so, of course, I went down a rabbit hole of trying 1,000 different things. And I honestly, from age 14 to age 19, I felt awful. I purely awful. I had skin rashes. I had anxiety. I had bloating. I was going to the restroom. It was like a running joke with my friends, but I would go to the restroom 6, 7 times a day in school. And I had terrible periods to the point where I could not go to school for 2 days because I was crippled with pain. I would be calling my mom in the middle of high school, "Mom, can you pick me up? I bled through my jeans again." And everyone just told me I was fine and I was normal and that there was nothing wrong with me. And I was like, "Well, this is wrong." So, of course, I decided to get my degree in clinical nutrition because I was like, "I'm going to solve this mystery." I am dead set determined on it. And by the time I was 19, I was diagnosed with 2 autoimmune conditions, celiac and colitis, which could be dealt with through nutrition. So I was like, "Yeah, maybe this is it. I figured it out." And then 23, I will never forget this. It was my graduation day. I was supposed to be walking across the stage. And I called my parents and my best friend. I was like, "I'm not going." I had gained 30 pounds that month. The dress that I had bought 2 weeks ago no longer fit. I was anxious. I was crying. I had landed my dream job at the best nutrition company slash gym in the area. And I was having panic attacks. It was awful. And so I was like, okay, I'm a fraud. I just graduated with a degree in nutrition, huge imposter syndrome. And I went to my doctors, and guess what? I was like, okay, they're going to see 30 pounds of weight gain in a month, and they're going to be like, "This is bad." They looked at me and they're like, "This is normal for a woman of your age. It's just going to get worse." And I was like, "You have to be kidding me. You're joking me, right?" And I remember telling them, "I think my hormones are off. I think my hormones are off. There's something wrong." And so at that point, completely alone, no option other than medication, anxiety medication, things for autoimmunity. I said, "No, there's a better way." And so I had the opportunity to work with my professors to really dig into some of the biochemical interactions between nutrients and hormones. I had the opportunity to work under, quite a few integrative physicians and gain that specialty area in integrative nutrition. And that's when like that light bulb clicked. And it was like, no, our hormones do control every single aspect of our health as women. We have a 28-day hormone cycle. And in that, it influences our ability to work out, our desire to socialize, our ability to be productive at work, or even to concentrate on certain types of projects. It impacts our ability to burn energy efficiently or not, or even to work out. And it was just like, okay, if they have such an influence, then there must be a way to support them through diet. Like, that's what we believe in integrative nutrition. And so I started to follow that suit. I recognized that there was a connection between hormones, autoimmunity, all of that. And when I started to apply these, principles to myself in my own life, I have put my autoimmune conditions in remission. I'm 100% off medication, never been on. I have been anxiety medication free for the last 8 years. And like, of course, yes, the cool things. I lost 50 pounds. I'm in the best shape of my life. I had my daughter when they told me that fertility would not be possible for me. But I think the biggest thing is seeing how it has empowered my life. And more importantly, seeing how many women I've been able to support and guide who felt alone, who felt that they're like, I'm doing it all right. I'm perfect. I'm eating clean. I'm working out. I'm following the newest trends. And yet nothing I can do seems to move the needle. So it's been amazing, but of course, not without some struggles.
For
Um,
sure.
for women, learning this is so important, like you said.
It is. And your story is fantastic. And I'm sure that that's really helpful to people in this struggle because it can impact so many things, in your life. And when I finally got to the point and had worked with a personal trainer who would talk about different phases and how you feel stronger, whatever. We'll get to that, but it's empowering to have a better understanding of your body and what's going on. And now, as I'm entering into perimenopause phase, it's a whole new ballgame. I'm trying to figure out again. And I'm so grateful that I found it's a PA actually, in functional medicine that is working with me because she's like, no, we're not doing the regular blood test because they're not going to tell us anything that we need
Yes.
to know. And finding your person to be able to help you out. So hopefully all of our listeners can get something out of this today. I want to back up and just start kind of from the beginning. Like, what are the hormones that we're talking about? And just a basic overview.
Absolutely. So, I'm a science nerd, so I love to give the why because when I feel like when we know the why, we're more empowered to be like, oh, that makes sense, and to change our routine to incorporate it. So, from baseline, hormones are these chemical messengers, and their job is to communicate messages to each system so that our body can operate in harmony. What happens is when you have symptoms, your hormones are disrupted. Hormones become disrupted because systems are disrupted. And it becomes this kind of really terrible feedback loop because if one system is disrupted, hormone becomes disrupted as a byproduct. They communicate a very incorrect message to the next system. That system responds accordingly and it snowballs. As I mentioned, women have a 28-day cycle. So for men, their clock resets at midnight. For women, we have hormone fluctuations across 28 days. And the key hormones that are fluctuating across those days are estrogen, which a lot of women are like, oh, estrogen's bad. No, I call her the baddie hormone. She is amazing. She gives confidence. She helps push us into ovulation and support healthy menstruation too. You have follicle stimulating hormone, which is kind of like I call it a low-key one, but you need that to boost follicular health for ovulation. We have testosterone, which peaks at ovulation. And a lot of people think like, oh, it's going to make me bulky. It's a men's hormone. No, testosterone gives you confidence. It gives you libido. It gives you lean mass development, metabolic health. And then progesterone, which comes after ovulation, which really helps to support progestation. That's what I think of it as. It helps to thicken the uterine lining. It slows you down, slows down nourishment to help your body prepare for potential conception. Because your body kind of thinks you're trying to get pregnant, whether you really are or not, whether you want to or not. That's your body's goal. And then that fourth one, that's kind of like the biggest one that women struggle with, is cortisol. And while that's not a direct sex hormone and related to your cycle per se, we have a cortisol curve that dictates just kind of our stress, and your cortisol is your stress hormone. If your body is overly stressed, cortisol creates a biological halt. It pulls the emergency brake in your body, and any non essential function, which what we deem essential versus your body is totally different. But any non essential function like ovulation, fat burn, lean mass development, even some system function will get disrupted as a byproduct. And so most of the women that I support, and there are other hormones, there are many other for another
Yeah.
podcast,
Yeah.
but those are kind of the four key ones that women struggle with or that you can easily identify that there's system disruption with. And even though that there are other hormones that are, a part of this process, they're typically, if you go downstream to look at that root cause, it's going to start with those four
Mhm.
always. And then other things are impacted as a byproduct.
Right. So there's our hormones. And so what do we do with that? So somebody, comes to you with some different symptoms, and where do you start? How do the hormones come into play?
I want to touch back to what your functional medicine doctor said because they were like, "Hey, blood work is not super helpful." And that's a really important like mark to this journey because I think a lot of women and I know I lived in it too, live in this space of like, "Okay, well, I keep going to my doctor and they keep telling me that everything is normal. My blood work looks
Yeah.
fine." Blood work is only a single point in time. It's often not tested vastly enough or frequently enough to really understand what's happening at a system level. And
Mhm.
so a lot of women get stuck in that gray area.
Yeah.
Your symptoms, right? They happen because hormones are disrupted. They're immediate biofeedback from your body. It's almost like your body's little report card to say, like, hey, help me. And it's your body's way of saying, I need support.
Mhm.
Society has really, really perpetuated this belief that like it's normal to have PMS. It's normal to struggle through menopause. It's normal to be cranky. Women are just hormonal. And so a lot of us start to quietly just let those symptoms dictate how we show up in our life. And I want to flip that narrative for everyone listening today. Your symptoms are not your Achilles heel. Your symptoms are not something that holds you back. They can be your superpower if you understand how to truly listen, tune in, and respond. And so, looking at your symptom clusters can help you like hone in on, okay, this is what's happening, and here's how I support my body. For example, one of the most common imbalances that women struggle with, even my perimenopause and menopause women too, is estrogen dominance. And so symptoms of estrogen dominance that are pretty staple, I would say, are you have really, really heavy periods, almost like with clotting, with or without, right? They can be very dark purple, dark red in color for the actual like coloring. It can come with a lot of heavy cramping. And women with estrogen dominance typically store more fat in their arms and in their hips because of estrogen distribution. It's really common to become estrogen dominant for women because of hormonal birth control, HRT, your body stores estrogen in fat tissues, and also the like xioestrogens, which are in our environment, or how we eat. If you're living with low progesterone, which is estrogen's little like companion, you can be either low progesterone or estrogen dominant as a result of low progesterone. But typically, when we see those symptom clusters, it's if you struggle with a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression and mood swings, progesterone helps to calm and improve serotonin production. If you have a lot of PMS, breast swelling and tenderness, or if you struggle with spotting during your period or like a brown rust color, any of that. Um, for women who are in menopause or who are super stressed, which is a fun one, living with low estrogen, you'll typically struggle with things like insomnia, hot flashes, night sweats. Oh my lord, I had so many night sweats after my baby. You'll also struggle with things like having very, very faint periods. It'll be like light pink. There's also typically more mood disruptions with low estrogen too. And then again, I would always say this is kind of the pinnacle. If you're like, wait, everything you're saying to me, Tasha, like you check, 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 I have
Yeah.
all of them, then typically that big one that you're struggling with is high cortisol.
Mhm.
And again, we live in hustle culture, recovering work and stress addict over here. So I'm not going to
Mhm.
say I haven't been there myself. But If cortisol, like I said, it's the emergency brake. So if your cortisol is high, all other hormone production pathways are disrupted as a byproduct. So typical symptoms of high cortisol is you have a lot of anxiety, like you wake up tired and you might
Mhm,
feel tired, but you can't go to sleep. You might wake up a lot in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Also, storing abdominal fat or, stubborn belly fat, that's your body's way of protecting its organs. So
mhm,
that'll be the last to go. And then if you're still a menstruating woman, if you have cycle irregularity, so missing periods, lack of ovulation, either really short cycles, like less than 27 days, or really long ones, greater than
mhm.
30, those can all be signs that your body is very, very stressed out. So it can be a lot, right? Especially when you're learning this. And like you said, some of you today might be like, "Ah, I've never heard this. This is overwhelming." Some of you might be like, wow, okay, it's starting to click because you're hearing it a couple times. But really, instead of running to the pantry for your Motrin or ibuprofen to kick the headaches, or instead of just, trying to suffer through it, if you can really constructively say, like, oh, okay, this is what my period looked like this month, like this is what my diet looked like, this is how I can support it, then you can be proactive in moving past that symptom and really taking back control of your health. And when your hormones are balanced, when your body feels happy, safe, and secure, every other part of your health goals, and I'm going to be bold and say it, every other part of your life heals as a byproduct of that. Like it's very important to address.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yes. And so when a client comes to you and they're like, "Hey, I have these symptoms. Now what?" Do you do testing? Do you work from the symptoms or what's the starting point generally when you're working with someone?
Absolutely. That's a great question because a lot of people don't know where to start, right? Like I said, blood work can be a helpful tool. And while I never require my clients to start with it because it's a single point in time. If you are going to start with blood work, if you're a data lover, which is okay, you would want to start with like a full thyroid panel. So T4, T3, TSH, TPO antibodies, cortisol at multiple points of the day, and then estrogen, progesterone at multiple points of your cycle, and testosterone. But realistically, starting with your symptom patterns is more than enough. And I would say if I've coached 2,000 women now, 98% of them start without any blood work
Mhm.
and never get it. And they're completely fine because they just really tune into their body and they tune into that unique need. And I would say if you're struggling with those symptoms, small, very small habits can make the world of a difference. So, for example, like if we're looking and living in a space of your symptoms are most congruent with estrogen dominance, one of the best places to start is just focusing on healing your gut and your liver, because those are two key estrogen filtration pathways. So something as, simple and doable as taking a very high quality probiotic that's at least 5 billion count in multi-strand to rebuild your gut flora to help bind to the estrogen and get out, or incorporating really cruciferous vegetables that are high in indole 3 carbinol, which help bind to estrogen and pull it out. So things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, those can be really, really impactful. If you're living with high cortisol, the best thing that I can recommend doing is eat more food. You're probably sitting here going like, "What?" But if your body is stuck in a famine response because you're either dieting or unintentionally under eating because diet culture has really skewed that perception, your body won't feel safe. So moving through a reverse diet, incorporating more food, eating every 3 hours, choosing protein forward meals, that can all really help to rebuild metabolic function and your body's trust that it's like, oh, okay, she's feeding me. I'm safe to move forward with my processes. If you're struggling with low progesterone, typically this is related to nutrient deficiencies like vitamin E, vitamin D, and magnesium. So, incorporating foods like almonds, sunflower seeds, dark chocolate, dark leafy greens, especially during your luteal phase. So, those few weeks before your period can help provide the biochemical compounds that your body needs or the building blocks to support that hormone production. And then, if you're struggling with low estrogen, I think this is like a twofold recommendation because if you're struggling with low estrogen and you're a woman who's like in her 30s or even 40s, typically that's related to high cortisol. So we would want to address that first, right? But if you're starting to transition into perimenopause or menopause, then I really recommend incorporating foods that are high in phytoestrogens. And that's a natural plant compound that mimics the active estrogen in your body, but it won't lead to, terrible it's like a xyoestrogen. So things like flax seeds, strawberries. You can even incorporate small amounts of like edamame and tofu. Those ones are a little bit higher. So if you have like risk of breast cancer, might be mindful with those. But like I said, these small habits, right? They might just seem like one or two things, but they help your body unlock, right? And then the next, biggest component, and I might be jumping the gun here, is starting to align your life with your cycle. And that's, a really big portion of that too.
Yeah, I'm just nodding my head and all of this. No, I'm a high cortisol person. I recently, a couple weeks ago, did a Dutch test. And so, for those of you who aren't familiar, it was urine and saliva. And I did 6 different times during the course of the day. So, it gave me a 16-page report. This was working with my practitioner to show me where my estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol things are. And so again, you maybe don't need it. We were just looking because we were suspicious because I had so many of the symptoms. We just really wanted to get a baseline of this. And it's like, well, okay, until you until you can settle down a little bit with that cortisol in your adrenals, really nothing else is to work.
Yeah.
Yes. But I would love to hear more about aligning with your cycles and what does that mean?
Absolutely. Okay. So I'm telling you all, when you can't do it perfectly, right? Life, unfortunately, was created around the men's hormone cycle. So there are some things, responsibilities that we can't fight. But I like to approach this with my clients before I even introduce it with the mindset of what can you add to your diet or what can you add to your life to help align and optimize your hormones, right? Part of the reason we get so burnt out, stuck on high cortisol, overwhelmed, is because there's this expectation of us that we need to eat the same amount of food, have the same intensity workout, go in and burn 500 calories every day, get the same amount done at work, but then also show up and get your kids and do all the things for them, or take care of your house, or be there for whoever in your life, right? And we think that we have to operate at all the time at same efficiency. Again, our bodies do not work that way. And where we start to burn ourselves out is trying to force that. Comparatively, when you start to align your life with your cycle, coined cycle syncing, that's what people call it. I call it cyclical nutrition or cyclical fitness. Then you start to recognize, okay, this is how my hormones are fluctuating. This is what my body might need. And this is how I can adapt some things to align with that. Well, let's start with your menstrual phase. I think that's one easy for everyone. So, you're in your menstrual phase when you're on your period, right? Your body is bleeding, it's shedding that excess lining. Your body uses that at that time, like all your hormones are at their lowest, they're flatline. So, it's really natural to feel tired during that time because your body is trying to restore. It's natural to feel tired at that time because you're literally losing minerals as you bleed. And in terms of where you're at with your social life or your productivity, you don't have a high desire to socialize. Your body needs that rest, it needs that space. So, how you can start to adapt your life to that is from a nutrition standpoint. Most people say, like, oh my God, I'm so hungry during my period. It's because your metabolic rate is literally higher. So, eating more foods, choosing more high protein, high omega-3 fatty foods to help fill that nourishment gap can make sure that your body doesn't get underfed and overstressed. From a social perspective, it's 100% okay to say, like, I do not want to socialize with anyone today. You could decline birthday parties. You could go to a birthday party, but then save Sunday for a day to like binge on the couch. If you need to take a nap, take that. Your body is trying to recover. And from like a productivity level and a work level, it's a really good time to be very reflective and take a time to evaluate. So we're pretty introspective at that time. We often reflect on, what went well, what we would like to change in our life. It can turn negative if you let it, but it also can be really positive if you say, like, okay, here's my successes, my big goals for this month. Here's how I showed up for them. Here's opportunities for growth and how can I move forward in the next month. So when your period ends, like, stop with actual bleeding, not spotting. So you might spot a little bit after, but like when your flow, need to change your tampon, your pad, your cup every couple hours ends, That's the start of your follicular phase. And that's what's known as kind of like your spring. Your hormones are on the rise. You start to feel creative, excited, and like you have life again, right? And that's natural. Even in this balanced state, you have a little bit more zing in your step. My husband will always, like just last a couple weeks ago, actually, I got out of bed, I hadn't said a thing. And he looked at me and he's like, "You're in your follicular phase, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." "How'd you know?" And he's like, "You're just brighter. Your aura is different." I was like, "I'm back, baby." But during this phase, so it's typically about 5 days, this is when your metabolic rate actually decreases again. So you might find that you don't need as much food because your body's not working as hard. In terms of your body's ability to, socialize, you're really creative. You're really excited about that new opportunity. So it's a wonderful time to, plan a spontaneous trip or brainstorm a new project. In my business, that's when I plan out all my social media because I have all these fun, vibrant ideas or my blogs or my podcast topics, whatever it might be. And because your hormones are on the rise, that's when your body's kind of ready and willing to accept the intensity of workouts again. So this is a good time to start adding intensity back into your routine. Typically, I recommend a kind of like a hypertrophy endurance style type of training. So it's like a little bit more moderate weight, like range, but higher reps. Then when you notice this is hard for some women because they kind of are like, but when do I ovulate? Typically, ovulation's around day 14 if you're in a healthy optimal cycle. But your ovulation or ovulatory phase is about that 5-day window in which you're fertile. So typically 2 or 3 days before your ovulation, which is a 24-hour act, and then a few days after. You'll know you've hit this phase when you feel like you're untouchable, right? You're going to be feeling hot and heavy. Your sex drive is going to be through the roof. I always joke when my clients are like, "Tasha, I had like a very scandalous dream." I'm like, "Good." And so also that's when your cervical mucus gets really sticky because your body's like, "Hey, I'm ovulating, I'm ready." During this time, because estrogen and testosterone are peaking, your energy is too. Like this is when you have the ability to have amazing conversations, when you want to have presentations, when you want to host a party at your house or go out dancing with your girlfriends. Like it's a time to be social. From a workout perspective, because of where your hormones are at, this is when you can push yourself. This is when it's a great time to do high intensity cardio, a great time to do your heaviest lifts, your most intense workouts to push your strength capacity because you'll find that you'll do it and it doesn't exhaust you. In fact, you're like, give me more. I wish the whole month was my ovulatory phase. It's my favorite. Then as you transition into your luteal phase, you'll notice that energy shift. Again, this is when your body's prepping for potential conception. And so everything slows down because it becomes extremely protective of you and potential baby. Again, it doesn't know that you're trying to get pregnant. It wants to. So during this time, as progesterone rises, your energy greatly drops. Like it's not that you aren't energized, you're just not on top of the world like ovulation. It's different. Your metabolic rate increases again. So a lot of people say, like, "Oh, I'm PMSy, I'm hungry." It's because your body has that demand because it thinks that it's going to take on and basically an extra tenant, an extra metabolic need. So it's important to increase your calories with that. Your workouts start to shift where your body's really strong kind of a few days after, so it can handle some intensity. But as you get closer to your periods, you want to taper it off. So I always say, like, start with like lower reps, higher weights. And then as you get closer to your menstrual phase, lower weights, higher reps, easier. And cardio should stay pretty moderate during that time. So just like zone one, zone two. And in terms of like work and social life, this is when you know how they say when women are pregnant, they nest? That same hormone influences your luteal phase. So you tend to be really productive, task oriented. So it's a really good time to like organize your house, get all those administrative tasks done, get really point A to point B thought processes done. Because then once you start that bleed again, your body needs that rest and it kind of rinse, wash, repeat. And when you start to think, okay, I might not be able to avoid the presentation that my boss scheduled for me in my menstrual phase, but maybe I will take some time after that presentation to like block off time in my calendar to like rest and digest and like take some time off, or I don't really feel like organizing my closet in my ovulatory phase. So can I push that to my luteal phase and do something that aligns with my hormones in that phase? Again, it's never perfect, but starting to shift all of that you find that you're more energized, more connected in life. And it releases that idea that you have to be perfect.
Yes, and I've just this is audio only, right? But my head has just been nodding like for the last half an hour. And I love hearing that. And I'm one who has heard some of this information before. And every time I hear it, I get something new from it, even if it's just that reminder, because I do have some of those perfectionistic tendencies too. And then I'll get really frustrated and procrastinate and do things. But also to keep in mind when I have some of those tasks or I feel like I really want to do some deep cleaning, that I think, hey, I'm going to set aside this time and do it. And then I get there and it's like, ugh, this is the last thing I want to be doing right now. That working with your cycle might make more sense with some of these things. And like you said, even just the social aspects of things too, that if you're a person where maybe you're really budgeting that time and or with people all day long. There's times when I know that I can't handle any more people in the evenings or on the weekends. So again, use your cycle to kind of help plan some of that out and work smarter, not necessarily harder.
It's so true. And sometimes, like, so I live in a space of perfectionism, anxiety, and then also I have ADHD and I'm not on medication for it. And so sometimes, like, I'm not coining this because I heard this from another podcast, but she was speaking about, like, oh, well, really tune into your energetics and what are you like avoiding? And, what are you
Mhm.
leaning to that time? And I was thought of it. I was listening. I was like, yeah, she's really just saying in a different way, like tune into your hormones here some days and know that I have this like blog post or this like long newsletter to write. And it's just like, I can't stick. And so instead of putting that pressure on myself, I say, okay, can I delegate? Or I can't avoid this, but can I reward myself afterwards? And
Mhm.
it really does. It truly changes your life and social boundaries. It's been a godsend as a new mother for myself, because my energy just got zapped because it goes to my
For sure.
19-month-old. And so to be able to say like, oh, okay, like it's my luteal phase, and instead of hanging out with my friends, I'm gonna go binge read a book all weekend. Like, but it gives you the opportunity to be better in your whole life because rather than like one foot in, one foot out, or trying to force yourself through, you can just be intentional with how you give your energy, how you take energy, all of that.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and again, kind of giving ourselves permission, and it's ridiculous that we need to do this, but societal pressure and cultural pressure and all that have made us think that we need to. But giving ourselves permission to work with our body because we're going, going, going. We have all of these other pressures and you're working and running a household and you might have children and relationships and all of those pieces, and there's going to be times where your body's like, yeah, too much.
Yeah.
And that just because your sister or your friend or your coworker or somebody else is going 110%, you might be on different cycles, but looking to your body instead of the external. So that internal feedback versus the external of what the world thinks you should do, when you should do it, and how quickly it needs to be done, I think could just be so helpful. And you don't have to overthink this. Just tune in.
Just tune in. It was my turn to just like nod in absolute agreement there because you were just so perfectly like reinforcing that point. Absolutely. And I think, again, I know just from my own personal experience, and so I know there's women out who feel the same. But especially when I was at my sickest, and when things were not jiving, I remember comparing myself to all of these other women. Like, why are they getting it right? What am I doing wrong?
Mhm,
And part like learning to tune into your body and to step away from that comparison game and just recognize like that's not what I need right now. And that's
mhm,
okay. Or that's not what works for my body. Like, oh, it is freeing, it's empowering, and it allows you to step into that space of like, yeah, whatever works for me. There is
mhm,
no one right way to do this. And even in, this hormone balance journey, coach 2,000 women, and the journey to success for each of these women has not been the same because
mhm,
what they need from their hormones, what they need to make it work in their lifestyles, what they need as to make it work for them emotionally, spiritually, it's different. But
mhm,
learning to tune in, learning to just like honor that space, like that's step one right there.
mhm,
And I said it earlier, never be discouraged by your symptoms. Even if you got into a space where you felt balanced and then you feel like you backslid, life changes. Like there's no normal in life. I tell my clients this all the time. There's no such thing as normal, right? There's no such thing as the normal schedule. There's always just different seasons, different
Mhm.
turbulences that we hit. So just recognizing that, hey, if you have a new symptom, then you just have this toolbox now that you can be like, okay, I know how to support it and I know where to go from there, right?
Yeah, and I know for me, okay, so I mean, there's the mindset shift of giving yourself permission to be able to do some of that. But then it was also my age and the diet culture and all of those industries. But it feels like I'm giving up or I'm not pushing myself hard enough. How do you work with clients who are resistant, or it feels like, if I don't do my high intensity cardio 3 times a week, every single week, that my life is going to fall off the rails? Maybe they feel like it's helpful for their anxiety, but when you get 14 days of your cycle, it also feels like torture to be able to do that. What does that look like when you're coaching with somebody?
Oh, that is an amazing question because I know that I felt it and I know so many other people do. So, what I really try to encourage my clients to lean into is it's not that you can't do, right. It's not that you can't do cardio. It's not that you can't work out or do whatever makes you feel good. Cause I work out, 5 days a week for my anxiety, but it's really leaning into that new challenge. Like we always use what's called rate of perceived exertion, right? For any workout. And if you're from newer to training, it's basically a way to self-check of like, how hard am I working on a scale of 1 to 10, right? A lot of us hold this mindset that if we're not a 10 all the time, then we're not progressing. But I always say, let's shift that. Okay. Let's learn how to be a 10 when the RPE is a 6. And let's really lean into the challenge. And you're going to find in that space that you're going to gain something from that. You're going to gain a very particular euphoric high, or you're still going to be able to celebrate the success that you had in showing up for yourself. And so it's shifting that mindset and that approach from being I'm all or nothing to I am all in on my health journey, right? You can be all in on your health journey and you can be connected without necessarily going 120 miles per hour all the time. And so we do a lot of mindset coaching as to like, okay, let's lean into that. What does that feel like for you? And then also where is that stemming from? What is that underlying belief? Like what's the root cause of it? Is it feel that you can't be successful, or is it a fear that you'll never be successful? And then really trying to overcome and celebrate just showing up. But I will say diet culture has really, really skewed our perception of that. And for my go-getter ones who like to work out all the time, who feel that you have to burn 500 calories, another big principle that I remind is that like, if your body feels stressed, if you feel threatened, you're just burning the candle at both ends and nothing will change. And so instead, why don't we focus on the rest? And why don't we focus on celebrating the rest or the slowdown? And when we start to gamify it that way, I think it kind of takes that breath of fresh air. But it can be scary. I get that, especially when
Mhm.
you hold these beliefs and values. But it doesn't happen overnight. And that's one thing I will say is that it's something that when we start this coaching process or when you're starting your hormone balance journey for any of you, like grant yourself grace.
Mhm.
The growing into it, but you'll find that it's just a new challenge that you get to throw yourself into.
Well, and I found even just in the last couple of months for me, I was pretty regimented and I'm a fitness class person, right? So I had my
Okay.
classes that I was doing, be it strength or the couple of days that I had my small group strength training and that sort of thing. But I've found even like 2 days where I've kind of made like flex days almost. And so I've noticed whether it's my cycle or just how I'm feeling, like maybe it's a walk, maybe it's a Pilates or yoga class, or hey, I'm feeling amazing. I want to go do spin and lift afterwards or whatever. But kind of getting out of my rigidity too of, here's my workout and this is what I do on these days, and just allowing myself to listen to my body more. Is it perfect? No. Is it every day of the week? No. But starting somewhere, and it's been helpful to me. I feel like I'm getting enough some of those other days, but hey, what do I need in here? And so just throwing that out there for my other overachievers, you can start small and
Really.
adjust from there.
Just one little workout. I've done the same thing. I'll sometimes, especially in a good place to start, I think how you said it is in that luteal phase. I'll do a check-in with myself where as I get closer to my predicted period, your hormones can drop. Everyone is different. So like mine drop a few days before my actual bleed starts. Some people, their hormones drop and then their bleed starts same day. So I'll just do a little mini check-in as I get closer of like, how do I feel today? Is my first intuition to say that I don't want to work out and I want to go for a walk instead of the lift that I had planned? Or do I feel good? And I tune into that. And sometimes I have to talk myself through the guilt of like, oh, well, you had this plan and you missed this workout. But I remind myself that resting now, taking the time now allows me to show up when I feel my best, right? And so just listen to your intuition, like listen to that and trust that. And remember that it's never a missed workout. It's never going to derail you. In fact, it's going to set you up for success in the long run.
Amazing. I made a note to myself here as you were talking. I want to go back to it when we were just talking about adding in certain types of foods, depending on how you were feeling and different symptoms. What is your perspective on real food versus supplements? And put a note here, especially with omega-3s is what came up into my mind. Because I personally have a hard time getting that in to my diet, like with food. Are supplements better? Where do you sit on that?
You're here with the great questions today. I love it. So, I firmly believe that supplementation is a tool to fill gaps that nutrition otherwise cannot. And so, let's use the omega-3 example. Literally no one except individuals living in Japan, I'm pretty sure the last study I read, are able to get enough omega-3 in their diet. It's just extremely challenging. And so there are certain foods and supplement or food where you really want to lean into whole as much as possible because the bioavailability of foods, plant compounds, things like that, it's always higher in supplement or than in supplements. But it's okay to lean into them if you're strategic. So I would say, my core supplements that I typically recommend for all clients because they're going to cover your base is a high quality multivitamin. I see a lot of my clients, they come to me with this like dissertation of like, I'm taking B6, B7, B12, vitamin A. And again, when you take individual supplements like that, plus you're also eating a nutrient dense diet, you risk yourself to toxicity levels for certain ones. Also, you risk yourself to just wasting a ton of money because if you're taking a bunch of vitamins and they're water soluble, you just pee them out. So a multivitamin is nice because it covers all of those bases at the supported RDAs. So you won't risk toxicity, but you don't need to, cherry pick. I always recommend omega-3s because again, it's extremely hard. I know I try to eat fish multiple times a day, avocados all the time, but it's just challenging. And then I recommend a high quality probiotic because even though you can eat fermented foods, they're not necessarily always diverse in cultures. Also, we can lose a lot of bacteria in digestion. So those are my core three. With that, when you can try to support your body with whole foods as much as possible, that is always, the best because not only are you getting the micronutrients of the food, which are the vitamins, the minerals, the polyphenols, but you're getting the energy to support your body, right? I think my favorite analogy to use is like your body is a Mercedes Benz or an Audi, it is a Porsche. Food is gas. Okay. You cannot give a Mercedes 87, the standard, right? Sure, it might function, it might get you from point A to point B, but that system is going to break down fast. Your engine might light on fire. And then if you're not eating at all, if you're not putting any gas in the tank, like you're not going anywhere. So choosing, and I don't like to use healthy versus unhealthy because all foods have the power to be superfoods if you eat them right. And yes, that's true even of cake, my friends. But I like to say, like, choosing nutrient dense foods that contain a lot of vitamins and minerals that have good energy for your body to use. That's always going to be the best approach. And then filling those gaps where you otherwise can't. And most of the time, if you're following cycle syncing principles, if you're adding in phase foods, if you're eating enough to fuel your body, everything else will fall into place. And you don't really need all of these fancy supplements and things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you so much for this conversation. And there have just been so many really helpful suggestions. And yeah, I don't have enough good things to say about it. So, but we are running out of time. So, where can people find you, learn more about what you do?
So I would say the best place and the easiest place to find me is on Instagram. I believe you'll be sharing my handle, but it's just Tasha Lynn _Stevens. I post a ton of education there. I am available. I love to send those little voice messages back and forth. And it's a great place to start to kickstart your journey. I also have a free hormone assessment that allows you to take some moments and sit down and put your symptoms in there. And we help you identify, okay, which hormone imbalances are the ones that you should be prioritizing. And we give you a customized blueprint strategy with nutrition habits, fitness habits, and lifestyle habits that you can implement to really kickstart your journey. And I think you'll be sharing a link to that too. So you can just go right there on my website.
For sure.
Yes.
So all of those will be linked in the show notes. And I know that Tasha has e-courses and one-on-one coaching if you want to dive in even more. So please check out her Instagram website and continue on with this great conversation. So thank you so much, Tasha. And thank you to the listeners. And I will be back next week. Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.